Okay, great. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. So this is the inaugural Talk for Thoughts. It's a series that we're starting where we want to have a bit more of an interactive session with founders of Tools for Thought. So those are people who are on a mission to help us achieve more, be more creative, be more productive, better manage our knowledge, and better take care of our mental health in the process. And so today, I'm very excited to be joined by KUMU and Emmanuel. They're going to give us a presentation, and there is going to be an opportunity to have more of a conversation and ask questions. But first, just let us know where you're joining from. Just pop it in the chat so we have a little bit of an idea of where people are joining from. I know, Emmanuel, you mentioned you're joining from Hong Kong, right? So
yeah, exactly.
That's nice. I'm in Paris. Where are you, KUMU?
I'm in Zurich right now, so in Switzerland.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
Reddy is joining from India. We have Mo, who's in the UK in Birmingham. So this is a very global audience here today. So thank you so much, Colin and Emmanuel, for joining us. I'm going to pop the link to your website in the chat afterwards so everyone can have a look. And I'm going to put it alongside the recording in the community afterwards. But basically, Weavit, and you can tell us more about it later on, is a digital brain that helps you better capture and connect your thoughts and tasks in inspiration. I think it's an amazing tool. I absolutely love it. I can't wait to learn more. But first, you will tell us all about how to supercharge your memory using the art of distillation, which sounds fascinating. So, KUMU, Emmanuel, the floor is yours for the next 30 minutes or so, and then we can have a bit of a Q&A together.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Anne-Laure. Thank you, Mo, for hosting us tonight. And indeed, we'll be talking about memory and how to use different techniques to distillate your knowledge and then store it in Weavit or in any other app. In fact, in 1973, a researcher whose name is not popping up exactly because I have a bad memory, and KUMU will help me on that one, made a super interesting experiment in Canada at the Bishop University, where he took 250 students and he showed them several thousand of pictures, such as the ones I'm showing here on the screen, at a rhythm of 2 or 3 images every 5 seconds, asking them to try to memorize as many as possible. So it took, I think, almost a whole week to show all the pictures. And remember, it was 1973, so they were using the real slides, the picture ones, and not the PowerPoint, of course. And then a week later, he did something very interesting. He asked the 250 students how many pictures they could remember, just out of the top of their head and just listing the pictures. And as it turned out, and you wouldn't be surprised, they could remember less than 5%. But then he changed the experiment and he showed to those 250 students several hundreds of pictures, one on the right side, one on the left side, randomly. One was out of the 10,000 they have been shown before. The other one was not part of that stack. And with over 90% success rate, they could tell which picture was from the pack and which one was not. And then they repeated the same experiment a month later, 2 months later, and they still could remember with the same accuracy. This experiment has been reproduced several times, even in the year 2000, with different protocols. And it has been shown that not only you can distinguish, you can remember if you were shown a picture from a given stack, but even taking very two close images, for example, a lady looking to the right or to the left, or a stack of banknotes, whether $10 or $1, you can still tell whether the $1 was in the pack or it was the $10, or if the lady was looking on the right or the left. And when I learned about that experiment, it was a bit more than 10 years ago now, my perception of communication and memory totally changed, because it was telling something that I was kind of suspecting, but I never had the science behind, is that our memory is just amazing, actually. It's just remembering almost everything the moment you are concentrating to remember something. And the students were actually actively asked to remember the pictures. So they were concentrating and focusing on the pictures. That's the positive. But the negative, and that's what actually changed my view, is that it's super difficult to find back the information. And it's super easy when you're shown the picture and you have to decide whether you've seen it or not. But it's super difficult when you're asked, point blank, how many pictures, what were the pictures, and so on, to find them back. And that's really what is the pain point for us when we're studying, when we are doing business, when we are learning every day, to recall the memory. And that's really the key thing. And in fact, this you are experimenting every day. For example, if I'm asking you, okay, how many books did you read last year, and list me the 10 books, little chance that you will be able to list all the books. But if I take your 10 books and 10 random books and I mess them up, 100% chance you will pick up the 10 books you've read, right? And then looking at the book and flipping the first few pages, you will be able to tell the whole story. And that's the key thing. You need the entry point to recall a memory. So I'm Emmanuel Lefor. I was born on 334 ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere. Don't ask me what it is. You'll find out by yourself about climate change, which means I'm around 45-year-old. I have spent most of my career in the banking industry. And the reason why I was so fascinated and sometimes embarrassed by my bad memory is that banking, as any other business, whether it's Anur's business or any of you guys' business, is about connecting the dots. And connecting the dots is about memory, of course. So whether you are a retired banker or an ex-banker like me, if you are Sherlock Holmes, a private investigator, a journalist, or if you are a doctor, you will always have to be remembering things about people, about what you learned, about the body, the medicine, where the rubber was 3 months ago, and so on and so forth, so that you connect the dots. And for those of you that have seen the series Sherlock Holmes, the recent one, he's always using this memory palace actually to remember things and make deductions, and that's really fantastic. And because I had a very, very bad memory, it was very difficult for me to do good business, and I'm a terrible commercial person because I have a lot of difficulties remembering name of people and the details about them and so on. That was 10 years ago, but now I totally changed my technique and I remember a lot of more things, and I use WeavIt as well. The main issue in my case is that I've had a scientific education, and in France, when you learn science, you are never taught to learn by heart things. You have to understand, okay? And it's the case mostly everywhere else. And the problem with understanding things is that it's cheating your brain, because you are actually actively creating the links, the deduction links that will bring you to the solution. So you're exposed with a problem and then you have to solve it. And then, oh yeah, I remember like the cosinus, the sinus, and the derivative and the physics and so on. It's super easy. And actually, learning, having a real, 90% like I did scientific education doesn't train at all your memory, except when you're doing chemistry and biology, where you have to learn a lot of things that are man-made, but that's a different story. And so I was left with this issue that we have a fantastic memory, amazing memory, but the memory is a maze. And the way I'm representing it is like a maze. I don't know if you played maze when you were younger, but you have to go from the outside to reach the middle. And when I was a kid, I was cheating. I was starting from the middle and then getting quickly to the outside. And of course, it was much easier because I was pointed directly from the inside to the outside. But the game is to have several entries, and only one of them is reaching the middle. The brain is working exactly the same way, and Anne is much more well placed to analyze this, of course, through her background. But we have only that number of paths that are leading to a specific memory, and the name of the game actually is to create as many as those paths possible to make sure that from any stimuli, actually, you are reaching that piece of memory. And so the way I wrote it is, many stimuli you shall provoke, each time you are shown, you're exposed to some knowledge, to a person, to some details, to the name of a movie or a story, and so on and so forth. Your brain is stimulated through this, and the more different angles you are being exposed to, the better the remembrance and the better the path to reach out to your memory. And of course, in my life, even if I don't remember the name of that guy I met 6 months ago, and that was, I remember, in Singapore, and he was a total crypto fan. But I remember totally the name of my parents and my wife and my kids, because I'm exposed to them all the time, and there's a very high chance that anything I'm thinking about will lead me to any memory with them. Okay, but what is super interesting is that there's a gigantic system that works exactly like this. It's called the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web is a bunch of web pages that are all interconnected together. And before Google existed, searching the World Wide Web was pretty peculiar, actually, because it was just indexing keywords, and it was showing you pages based on some random algo on keywords. The way the web is working is exactly like in the brain. So you go on a page that will link to the next page, and then you carry on, and you navigate the web, and at some point you end up with something super interesting and that you want to focus on, and so on and so forth. If you hadn't bookmarked this, and if you don't have a history browser, the history of your browsing in your browser, if you want to fetch it back 1 month later, it's super difficult. And maybe you will remember the page on which you started, and then you will try to hop back to your page. Sounds familiar? I think it happened to all of us. So we go back to the history, we're searching the history, when was it? What Google did actually is using the backlinks. And the problem with the World Wide Web is we just have the links. Okay, so we are linking from one page to the other, but when you land on the new page, if you land on WeaveIt, you don't know, and our website won't tell you from where you came, actually. So we don't show the backlinks on the page, right? And the brain doesn't show the backlinks on the memory. We can only forward the forward links. And so the more links you have from everywhere, the more you will point to the memory you are trying to get back. And it's exactly the PageRank algorithm from Google. The more backlinks a website has, so the more you are linking, many other websites are linking to that website. So WeavIt, we're trying to ask people to backlink us, as we say, then the better and the higher you will be ranking, exactly like your memory and how you will surface. And when we thought about WeavIt, we thought it exactly that way, having links and backlinks to all your tiny pieces of memory. But I'm jumping a bit ahead, and I will now pass it on to Komo, who will explain the part on distillation.
Thanks, Emmanuel. All right, so hi everyone from another founder of Weavit. What you see on the screen here, following in line with what Emmanuel just spoke about the internet and how it's kind of a very interesting backlinked organization tool for content on the World Wide Web. So if you would be on the World Wide Web and if you'd be on LinkedIn, this is a little bit of a mini graph of who I am from your understanding. But if Emmanuel, you go to the next slide, you'll see with a little bit more understanding and a bit more offline interaction that there are actually a lot more assets, topics, and ideas connected to me. For example, that I played football for 7 years, that I love deep sea diving and things like that, which is represented by that little sea creature at the bottom. Point being that when we are exposed to one channel of information, very often what we see is simply on the surface of the platform that is presented to us. But actually, the whole purpose of WeavIt, which we'll talk about later, is to really uncover and capture more latent information that lies in our personal and our professional worlds. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to move on, and I want to talk a bit more about distillation. So I'm doing it actually through the lens of 3 key productivity methods that for some of you, I'm guessing, who are very interested in knowledge hacking and productivity hacking are quite familiar with. One is the POWER methodology, which is by Sonka Arens, who is the organizer of Building a Second Brain. And then we have Dave Allen rather, in the middle, who is the author of the book Getting Things Done. And the last one is about the KUMU method, which I'd like to go deeper into later. The one thing that the two things that they all have in common, which I'll share a little more about, is that they all focus around distilling large bodies of information into breadcrumbs of thought or tasks or content, and creating association somehow between those disparate pieces of content and information. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is a power method. So that, as I just mentioned, is a method created by Tiago Forte, who is the organizer and builder of the process of building a second brain. It's more of a training school or platform that allows you to better organize your thoughts and content in the digital space. And essentially what it is, it's an organizational system developed to help you organize every bit of content that you get on the digital platform. So there are 5 key phases of this system. The first one lies in capturing information, the second in organizing, third in defining kind of priorities, and the last one reviewing these priorities, and the final one is to kind of evaluate which one is the most important to move forward with and actually then act on them. And the way he actually kind of centers organization is around whether the content that you capture is actionable or not actionable. So what you can see here is PARA, P-A-R-A, stands for 4 key areas. First one being projects, so things that you're actively working on as a knowledge worker. The second being areas, your roles and responsibilities that are defined by those areas, and putting content into that bucket. The third bucket is actually resources, so more supporting documents that help you either in the P and the A area. And the last one is archives, so stuff that you don't actually action on and things that you kind of leave for later until they finally become more relevant to you. Okay, so that's the first one. And the second method I want to talk about, I can see that the slides are not fully updated, but that's all okay, is the Getting Things Done methodology, which actually center around 5 key steps in this process. So David Allen, he's the one who created this methodology, and a lot of productivity hackers use it as a means to kind of engage and get more actionable work done and to really increase their productivity. Once again, one of the key parts of this method is that it requires capturing information. So capturing anything that crosses your mind, whether it's too big or too small, it doesn't matter. Just make sure you capture it. Clarifying it. So once again, it's a means of taking something larger and breaking it down into something more actionable, something more important for you to do something with. The third step is to organize information. So structure items in the right place, add dates, delegate actionables. The fourth one is to review those lists. And the last one, of course, is to go out there and do. The key thing between the POWER method and the Getting Things Done methodology is, whilst they focus on distillation of larger bodies of content, they are actually formatting information in a more linear manner. And this is what kind of segues me to the last method, which is a little bit the backbone of how we built WeavIt, the productivity tool we'll talk to you about. Okay. So the last method is a KUMU method, and Jeff Moore, who's the CEO and co-founder at KUMU, is actually an organizational or systems transformer for large corporates or MNCs. And why this is very interesting and acts a little bit more as a backbone of how WeavIt is organized is because it helps you to really make sense of your messy world in a non-linear way and much more in a graph-like manner. And it does that by leveraging tools such as systems mapping, network mapping, stakeholder mapping, which is essentially, instead of putting things in a linear list, what you're doing is you're leveraging a map-like format, because the way to really understand influence of a topic on an individual, or understanding the importance of a topic or a piece of content on your role, for example, which some of the other tools try to do, is by actually understanding in your world where does kind of the center of energy lie. So what are the topics that you're most interested in? Where does your the center of energy lie in your workplace and things like that? And using a linear method, you can't actually see that. But when you start to use a more map-like method, you start to see little clusters of information centered around people, topics, and companies, which we'll talk about, of course, a little bit more after that. So, okay. So basically, the KUMU method is governed by two key principles. One is, of course, causal loop, stakeholder mapping, and systems mapping, which is in essence to sculpt information around entities, experiences, and topics at multiple levels, so you can really understand influence. And the second one is to truly distill, connect, and recreate. So there are 4 key steps of KUMU. The first one, once again, is to capture. So capture existing information that's out there, connect that information together or to distinctive topics, people, or experiences. The third one is after you've done the distillation and connectivity part of it, you can actually recreate information. And that is actually the 3 steps that create a loop that drives cognition in our minds. This is how we learn more. Okay, so I'm going to leave the questions to the end, but I hope you guys have some questions on this. Okay, so how does this all connect to WeaveIt? Let's move on. So we believe, of course, that what is your knowledge but a series of accumulated ideas? And what are your ideas except for a series of accumulated thoughts? You know, and what is actually then your thoughts? What are they actually made up of? So we really believe that every thought is made up of just distinctive parts. And I'm sure everyone here who's familiar with knowledge work, knowledge hacking and things like that also feel similarly. One of the books that Emmanuel and I frequently talk about is Moonwalking with Einstein, written by Joshua Foer. And he refers to a thought or a memory, which is essentially a thought, I would say, anchored in a certain moment in time, is actually a combination of 3 key things: a person, a person, a verb, and a place. And so what I show you underneath is more like a pictographic representation of what we consider a thought. So it could be an individual combined with a location that you met that individual, combined with a time and maybe even event to give it a little bit more context. And that could be thought number 1. Now, you can have multiple thoughts on this individual, maybe a person connected to a book that he recommended or she recommended with a takeaway, and that person connected to a company. The point is, those 3 thoughts actually form key ideas in your body of knowledge. And let's move on to see how that actually expands a little bit more. So just taking that in mind, the breakdown of a thought, I want to talk a little bit more about the WeaveIt mission, you know, how we actually brought that distillation of thought into our mission and what are we actually trying to do here. So by leveraging, of course, graph technology and just showing you guys the distillation of thought, we believe that every individual that uses, for example, the product to capture their thought at this stage, at the very least, can start to form a mini graph of their know-how. So what you see on the right-hand side is, you know, a visual representation of maybe a user's graph after probably not even 1 day, because that's not that much information. And you'd be surprised how many zettabytes of information actually lie latent in our minds. And when you start to really capture it, you start to see there are a lot more connections between things that we didn't previously expect. So the WeaveIt mission is essentially to build a future of collective intelligence fueled by a network of personal and professional information or knowledge, let's say, broken down and linked to deduplicated, or let's say unique people, content, and experiences. So the key nodes that govern our graphs right now are topics, contexts that we have in our network, content that we capture. So every HTTP link that we have on the web is actually a distinctive link. Now, if Emmanuel and I would capture thoughts around a certain link on a graph, actually both of our thoughts would be pointing towards the exact same URL, which makes it extremely powerful over time. And the last one, of course, is experiences, which in another form is just an event. Okay, so how does this actually play out into the bigger picture? So over time, you see that when people start to actually collect information in their own little graphs, and because we are actually building WeavIt with a graph database, that you see individuals' knowledge can actually point to the same entities. They can point to the same events, the same topics, and the same people, making it very, very interesting in the future if you would like to actually tap into the knowledge of your community or to the knowledge of the greater, let's say, stratosphere. And so our vision is, of course, over time, is to create communities of knowledge and eventually a global graph of collective intelligence. And why is this interesting? Because ironically, in the next slide, you will see two key visuals. One of them is a visual of actually how your neurons connect with each other in your mind. And the other one is more of a zoomed out version or a snapshot of the galaxy. And most of you are probably wondering, which is which. And we actually flipped these over because I think we mistakenly thought one was the brain and one the galaxy. But actually on the right-hand side, that's actually a zoomed out version of the galaxy. And on the left is actually a view of the neurons in your mind. So it's very, very interesting because the essence is that when you zoom out on the planet, actually, if you see kind of a visual representation that mimics what's happening in your mind, there's really, really a lot of power around centers of intelligence and collective intelligence and connections. And it's really something that we would like to play into with the product that we're building today. All right, thank you. Okay, so how does that actually relate to WeaveIt? Let's come back down into a micro level and zoom back in and see, as a digital product, how does that actually work for a knowledge collector or a knowledge connector? So there are a couple of key principles that, new knowledge is formed on the basis and on the backs of existing knowledge. That's really how you form strong connections and ties to what you already know. So as a result, the only way you can capture latent knowledge is by integrating it, because of course we've got thousands of emails sitting in our inbox that is making up our knowledge, but we're not going to sit there and re-replicate that into Weavit. So one of the things we focused on in this version of the app is email integration, where you can actually extract a lot of contact data completely for your own use, and also a little bit of data about the kind of topics that you're centered around. One of the things that is very important to note for Weavit is that we do not have any write access to people's data, and also read access extends only to the subject line of a particular email and nothing further than that. Nobody actually is able to read anything in your emails. The second thing is, of course, capturing is a key thing to increase your productivity, but let's be honest, nobody likes to sit there and organize and tag things anymore themselves. So one of the things that Weavit leverages is actually the power of NLP algorithms that actually are not that artificially intelligent. They actually lean a lot on the integrations that you put into the app, but in an intelligent way, they actually surface suggestions to you of content or topics that may be interesting to you when you're typing out your thoughts. The third thing that's very important to mention is nobody likes this concept of, let's say, building a second brain without feeling that it's secure. So, we always like to reassure our users that data, even when in transit, is 100% secure. Of course, it comes down to the discretion of the user to really believe this premise, but truth be told, we completely understand data privacy and take it very, very seriously ourselves. The last one is very important, is knowledge. Whilst it's good to, increase cognition and capture information, it's no fun if you can't share that with others and actually export your thoughts to other mediums. So one of the key features we focus on as well is to be able to actually export your thoughts in a connected fashion. So you can see a couple of screens underneath. I'm not going to go into them so deeply because I'll let Emmanuel do a live tour of the app for maybe a couple of minutes. But let's move on to the next slide. So coming back to the premise of our presentation today, which is how to supercharge your memory with the art of distillation. And I introduced to you a couple of productivity methods, one of them being our most favorable, which is the Umuloop. So the Umuloop is comprised of 4 key steps, as I mentioned earlier: collecting information and content. The second is connecting. The third is creating, or rather recreating, information. And the last one is to really trigger cognition. So within collection, you have note-taking with potentially action-driven tags. You have note-making, which is essentially a creative inbox for media that you capture from outside, which is also a feature that Weavit provides. Then we have also node curation, which is another form of saying prioritize the most important content that is relevant to you at that moment. And then we have, of course, the most important part, which is connecting. So connecting new knowledge and new know-how to existing know-how through the means of network thinking and also mind mapping. And when you see things that are inherently related, but that is something that you're discovering, you have a bit of serendipity and combinational creativity that comes into play. And you can use that combinational creativity when you start to create new information. Now, what does that actually mean practically? I will show you on the next slide. So of course, there are a multitude of tools that are out there today. You must be wondering, okay, so what's the purpose of WeaveIt? You know, what's so special about it? Well, in the collection sphere, using kind of this productivity hack and this productivity method, you have a lot of different types of tools. You have OCR visual collection tools like My Mind, which leverage the power of OCR recognition to help you collect content more easily. Then you have, of course, everybody knows Pinterest, which never started off as a collection tool, but is now one of the most widely used visual collection tools out there. And then you have, of course, Weavit, which plays in the space of a more verbal and more written out driven, written collection tool. And following that, you step into the connection space where I'm sure some of you are familiar with Rome and with Reflect and Obsidian, which really focus on backlinking as well as a means of actually connecting new information to old information. And Weavit also plays in this space because we try and encourage everybody when they capture their thoughts to connect it to existing topics, people, or events that you have in your world. And then following that, because you can actually export content from Weavit, you can take it into your other and more preferred creation tools, which are better for creating new content, tools such as Notion, Medium that you can publish information online, Substack, Ghost, and of course the classics. So you have Google Docs and Microsoft Word, if anyone's still using those. All right, and then after these three steps come into play, you have cognition, which essentially happens in the mind and helps you to really supercharge your memory because you have distilled the knowledge you have in your mind into little bite-sized pieces. So the key here is to really show you how Weavit plays in the KUMU loop and the productivity method, and how we actually encourage people to collect and connect information so that you can then take it in a more structured way into a more the creation space. Okay, so that's it from me, and I hope you all have some questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kamal and Emmanuel, for the presentation. It was definitely interesting getting to learn about the sort of mechanisms behind Weavit and the principles and stuff you apply. I would love to kick this off with a couple of questions of my own. So you mentioned you make connections and you capture knowledge through Weavit. What happens after that?
Oh, maybe we can do a little demo, actually, that might be answering a few questions as well. So I will try to share my iPhone, which kind of works one time out of two. Oh yeah, it worked. What can you see directly? You can see the the screen?
Yeah.
Is it moving?
It is, yes.
It's
perfect.
moving.
Okay, so basically, when you open Weavit, you land on the timeline. There are a few pre-populated blocks for the first-time users, but then you put your own. And what is the timeline? The timeline is basically your brain dump. So anytime you want to add something into Weavit, you just press on the big Weavit button, you type something, blah, 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 and you save it, and it's there, right? And from there, different things happen, including the app can discover interesting links in a more or less intelligent manner, and we'll come back to it within the thought. So I will show you rapidly an example on this, but let's go through an already made example, which is more interesting. So this is a fake account, but I'm using the app on my side as well with a lot of different little thoughts like this. And each of them was either typed by me or sent from outside, like those two that we can see here. Where is Webb? Because I'm really passionate about the James Webb telescope, which is now like a few million kilometers away and looking in the deep dark, and Spot the Station. and you can send the link from outside or from Twitter, from your Safari or wherever to Weavit, and then it's stored there at the moment you stacked it, or thoughts that you took from inside the app. And as you can see, there are many little blue links there, which are simply links to generally other thoughts or topics and so on and so forth. So for example, if we take this one, let's see. Yeah, this one is one of my favorites. So when you're an entrepreneur, you have a lot of business ideas every day, more than when you are working at a bank. I can tell you, like, banking is kind of sterilizing your brain. But when you are free in the wild, and you have 2 new ideas every day. And so I'm storing all my business ideas in Weavit, and I simply have to tap on the button and say, oh, this is a great business idea about blah, blah, blah. And it's linked to my business ideas thread. And so what is a thread? It's just one of those blocks where I just put a title that we can see here in blue, business ideas, and we see it at the top. And anything that is was either created from inside that page or has the word business idea in the text will be linked directly to this page. And so if we look at, so this is kind of a mini web page for yourself, and you can expand it as long as you have more business ideas and so on and so forth. So I can tell you my personal one spans through dozens of screens. And if you look at the second one, for example, so using gravity to store electricity, using old mine shaft and so on and so forth. So if I click on mine shaft, then it moves me to this topic called mineshaft, which was extracted from Wikipedia, and I see the thought I had about mineshaft, so using gravity, blah blah. But I also see another one that I wrote today, which is ask Donald Churchill about sourcing cheap shafts. Okay, and it's been connected to mineshaft because I'm mentioning shaft. I also have a little task circle here, which you can actually toggle on or off, which remembers me to do something about this. So as you can see, we are kind of weaving the thoughts, and all those links are always leading to something new. So C platform. So I still see that thought, but I see another one, which is I wrote that a guy named Matt is specialist of C platforms. So all those links, you can either create them through the usual way, which is by using the hashtag. So for example, we can say Anne-Laure is expert. Oops, sorry, my typing is terrible, so that's why we never do this in real life. Is expert in neuroscience, and we say in London, for example. And then we just wait a bit, and then the parser will parse. I haven't tried it, so we'll see what it picks up. Okay, so it's picking up Anne-Laure as a person. So this is not my account, so I'm not sure there's an Anne-Laure person in this one, so we'll skip that one. If I click on neuroscience, okay, it's picking up the neuroscience topic from Wikipedia, so I just add. And then London, okay, it's picking up London from Wikipedia, and that's it. It's all linked, okay, using basic NLP. And now if I tap on neuroscience, I will see everything that I wrote about neuroscience. So in this one, only one thing about Anne-Laure is expert in neuroscience in London. If I tap on London, maybe I have other things about London. No, just one thing. But as you can see, the more you put, the more you get, of course. In a version that is coming pretty soon, actually, I think we need another month and a half of work. We are using in a much deeper way the natural language processing to actually suggest to connect you thoughts that are not based on keyword, but just similar ideas, which is kind of powerful. So it's in the work. So again, timeline is your brain dump. You have everything there, and then you can start navigating the way you want. Then you have a classic search that you can use to find any topic you wanted to mention. And with the improved NLP, you will also be able to search in kind of natural language. So for example, in the new version, we'll be able to type someone that is expert in the brain, and it will probably pick up the Anne-Laure is an expert in neuroscience thought, because brain and neuroscience are really close semantically. Again, you can create threads, and everything that is linked to a business idea in this one is there. And what is interesting is if you want to branch out one specific topic you were working on. So let's take back this second one about using gravity. Okay, then I can just type a title here, like gravity electricity. Okay, which could be an interesting topic to deep dive on. And then I just, yeah, there we go. I just tap on gravity electricity and it's creating a new thread. And then I can add more thoughts about gravity electricity and say, okay, that would be cool to save the planet. Okay. Oh, excuse my typing, but you see the idea. And then if you go back to timeline, what you see is that this little new idea that you've added, that would be coal to save the planet, is linked to gravity electricity, and then you just tap there and you see back your thread. So you can indefinitely branch out and create new thoughts connected to any thread, as we call them. And then if we just have a last look at the inbox, anything that you're sending from outside and in the future that people will share with you will be here in your inbox. And then the second tab is task with all the tasks that you haven't checked out yet. So everything is there. There will be a third tab soon, in hopefully 3-4 months from now, which will be part of the network, which will really be an inbox. And that's how, like Como was mentioning about our vision about creating a connected network of thoughts. If you want to tap in what I call the private knowledge of people, then LinkedIn and other social media are not the right place, because this is the public knowledge of people and doesn't represent their real self. What we will do with WeaveIt is we will create a space where you can query. So we'll say, oh, dear WeaveIt, can you connect me with someone that is expert in neuroscience, for example? And maybe I will receive this request in my future inbox here saying, oh, your friend Como would like to be connected with Anne-Laure Lequinf, which we believe is a suitable link. And I will receive that in the inbox. And the trick to preserve privacy and make sure that this is private knowledge is that Como, when asking this, doesn't know that I am the person that can be the intermediary, or that even better, Anne-Laure is the right person, right? It's always the people asking that doesn't know, and the people that have the information that can say whether they want to help, yes or no. And so this is the future version of WeaveIt, which is the global private knowledge network. And the last thing I wanted to show you, which is a little Easter egg, we are preparing a graph view also of your thoughts. So this is actually the real graph of my own WeaveIt. As you can see, I have been using it for a couple of months now in the latest version. So every square here is a little thought around, and normally you can see the heads of the headshot of people is a person, and the star is a connected topic. We will also include the Wikipedia image, and it's pretty entertaining to see it, and the way we'll probably use it, but we need to discuss a lot with potential users to better understand how they would like to use the graph, is to use it more in follow the path rather than exposing brutally the total graph, which is kind of nice to see, but it's a bit messy. However, if you start from an idea and you say, okay, branch out, and then you see, and then you can branch out to the next, and then you see your path evolving, and then that can help you a lot be more creative with your ideas. All right, that's that's all I wanted to show on the app, and I think that might have addressed part of your question, Mo.
That's amazing. Thank you for running through that. Anyone have any questions?
So one question, which is, how can my WeaveIt interweave with others' WeaveIt? Right. So essentially, how do you move towards a path of building collective intelligence? Well, one thing I want to talk about is there is an industry called the B2B Expert Knowledge Network industry, and that is a multi-billion-dollar industry whereby companies and the individuals within them who need expertise or knowledge actually leverage a middleman to connect them to the right individual on another, in another industry that has the right information or the answers. So one of our goals also is to try and disrupt this industry in a much more, let's say, scalable manner, and doing so by first creating communities and seeing how people exchange and help each other by means of pulling information, instead of where typical social networks today are kind of pushing and suffocating you with information, because there's no filter, there's no dam, let's put it that way. There's no dam to actually stop the current of information that's coming in, leaving a lot of people very flooded. So yeah, to answer your question, we will have a request feature and an exchange feature coming in the next, at least in the next 2 quarters, perhaps not in the next quarter, because it takes some time to develop that flow as well, especially in a very privacy aware way, so that every user is comfortable with the fact that, they give consent whenever there's an access request or there's a request for information. So yeah, that is how we are going to play towards that goal.
Great, very interesting. Anyone else have any more questions for the team? Cool. So I had just one final one. So you went through things like the KUMU method and GTD and stuff like that. Prior to your inception and creating WeaveIt and whatnot, how did you take theory and apply that for a whole product and make something out of it?
So how did we apply, just to repeat your question, the productivity principles, so the methodologies that we were exposed to the product?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So do you mind repeating your question?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just clarifying your question.
Sure. So how did you take these sort of principles and these methods and apply it and create a new product out of it? Like, how did you get to WeaveIt from going from principle and theory to something practical that you can make use of?
It's a good question. I think it's centered a little bit more around product management rather, because when you start to scope out the features that you need to build the product, they derive from 2 places, well, 3 places actually. The desirability from your target user base. The second is, of course, business objective wise, which is where the productivity methods kind of played into our vision as founders for what we wanted to build. And then the last one is, of course, are we at a place technologically where it is feasible to build these kind of features? So to answer your question, it stemmed a lot from the vision of the company rather than actually, the vision of the company also played into the target audience that we are capturing here, which are collectors and connectors. Yeah.
If I can share a bit about my own recent experience, so I had to write an essay basically for a think tank I'm working with about whether whatever the topic, but it was about competition and the common good. And the way I worked with WeaveIt was starting a thread about this thing. And then each time I had an idea while walking or discussing with people and so on, I would just quickly note down those 3-4 lines of idea, like yeah, competition can be good if it's in a sports manner, and then competition is bad if it's for individualistic vision and so on and so forth. And then it created a thread of many of those thoughts. And then I used those and I exported, and that's to answer actually Reddy's question. You can export the thought, you can export everything from the whole database, either in JSON or in TXT, or we are working on the .md format, so you can put it in your Obsidian if you want, for example, to a single thread or a single thought. So a single thread is just a plain text dump, quite organized and showing the links of your thread. And so what I did is I exported that thread of idea where there were 20 different ideas. I just pasted it into a Google Docs, and then I started writing my essay around those building blocks, right? So clearly WeaveIt, as you can see from the UI, is not meant to write 20 pages at all, but it's really, really good at capturing and linking ideas to people, to places, to events, and so on and so forth. And it's not a walled garden. You can share things to WeaveIt and share back things from WeaveIt, inside WeaveIt or outside WeaveIt, of course.
Great, that sounds interesting. Well, any more questions, guys, before we wrap up?
Reddy, do you feel like your question was answered thoroughly?
Well, thank you so much for addressing that. But the idea, because I just got access to it a few days ago, and I just started playing around with it. And one of the things I'm really curious about is because it's so mobile centric, right? And that's something I've been looking for in a tool for thought, is that having it at all times. Like I wake up in the middle of the night, my phone is next to me, I can throw something in there. And if I can tag someone that I've thought of, or someone I'm brainstorming that particular idea with, and especially with time zones, it's almost like by the time I wake up, someone else has already started playing with that idea and they've thrown in a few thoughts. So I'm wondering how I can interlink, share a thread with someone. Like I get what you're building at a larger scale, but at a personal scale, rather than ask someone who's an expert, maybe it's just like a playmate I'm just bouncing ideas and thoughts off with. So the privacy, thing isn't something to care for, because I mean, both of us are tied in and both of us are already connected and we have some sort of,
Yeah.
that's something I'm curious about.
Yeah, Emmanuel, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's exactly the idea of the network. So the network is both for querying, but also for sharing. And so through the network, you will be able to share any thought or any thread of thoughts. And the cool thing is that if you have tagged a mutual acquaintance or friend with the person you are sharing your thread with, or they have the same topics in their WeavIt, or they have the same events, then they will be connected directly to those topics. So they don't have to relink themselves that thread or that thought to their own thing. So those thoughts will just appear in a slightly different color with the head of the people that have shared that with you, and then you can work as a community or as a teamwork with this feature.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit more of a collaboration feature you're looking for rather than a simple sharing of your thoughts, because you can share your thoughts and have a version A of it and then have another individual basically import those same thoughts. And that would create another, let's say, a duplication of the thoughts. Without duplicating the entities, it would just duplicate the content. But what you're looking at, though, is something where you would create a thread that would say, okay, let's talk about the next Bitcoin startup, for example, totally random title. And you'd share that with somebody and they would, add 3 or 4 different thoughts on it. So by the time you're up, you see all of their blocks added to the thread. And the thread basically is the same thread shared across both of the user apps. That And there are moments where individuals would not like to show that they are connected to a given entity or a topic. And so we have to really work around the flow of that collaboration wise. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. It does. It definitely does. Because I was thinking along the lines of, you had thrown in the emojis in the beginning, the people, the pin, that's the location, the time, and the date, right? So I'm curious about how you can build some sort of collaborative connection through each one of those paradigms. So if there's someone tagged as a person in that thread, then they get it like in your inbox concept. If that particular location is pinned in that thread, then any of those thoughts around, like it could show up as a private thought where you don't get to see what it is, but that there are a lot of people thinking about stuff happening in that location.
Yes. You can basically aggregate the information and provide insights to users instead of actually giving specifics. That's definitely something on our roadmap. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
No worries.
So excited to try this out.
Enjoy it, and please give us your feedback, even if it's there's no such thing as bad feedback, but just give us all the feedback you have. That'll be very helpful.
Great question, Reddy. We have just one more I can see in the chat, and they've said, we've just pulled off a note-making challenge last February. I just want to ask, since WeaveIt is also bi-directional, any tips on implementing Zettel Casten method using it?
So, I can take that one. So I'm not super familiar with Zettel Casten, which is a very practical and step-by-step methodology, actually. But I've discussed with with a couple of WeavIt users that are familiar with the method, and they told me it was very practical actually, to some extent, for that method. So I think we should dig up a bit more and see if we can make a video about it.
So to add a bit more on that, the book How to Take Smart Notes, maybe you've read it, and it's definitely covering what Professor Lumen did around Zettel Casten, or building that system. But basically, when Emmanuel earlier was talking about threads within threads, that's essentially referencing and mimicking the same system. So you can always cross-reference threads, and those threads can also reference the origin or another thread. You can constantly build connections between the two and completely bidirectionally. So WeavIt is kind of a digital Zettel Casten, to be honest. It's a digital slipbox. Yeah.
Great
Right.
question. Great question, Antoinette. Cool. So just before we wrap up, I'm going to drop the link for WeaveIt here for everyone if you'd like to give it a try. Thanks again, Emmanuel and Kamal, for an amazing presentation. Great to know about you guys and your methods and stuff like that. So as usual, the recording will be uploaded to the community for everyone to have a look at, and if they couldn't join us today, they can have a look at that later. So thanks again. I think we're going to wrap it up here. And of course, if anyone has any questions, you can shoot it either in the community or just go through the WeaveIt website. Yeah, that's it. Thanks again. And
thank you very much, Mo and Anor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.